What happens when you put the most infamous movie monster in Dragon Ball history against the newest evolution of Saiyan power? Z Broly, a walking catastrophe fueled by endless rage, versus Daima Super Saiyan 4 Goku, a reimagined primal form backed by modern Dragon Ball scaling. Two versions of Dragon Ball from completely different eras, two wildly different power systems. One matchup that immediately breaks the fandom. Today, we're breaking down Z Broly versus Daima Super Saiyan 4 Goku, a fight that sounds insane on paper but gets even crazier once you actually look at the feats, the statements, and narrative intent. Let's get into it. One of the more quietly revealing moments in Dragon Ball Daima doesn't come from a flashy transformation or a finishing blow, but from a reaction shot. During the exchange between Vegeta and Goma, the Supreme Kai's visible shock at the sheer force of their blows, despite neither of them transforming, speaks incredible volume. It would suggest that his internal benchmark for Goku and Vegeta may still be anchored in the Buu Saga era, where overwhelming power was almost exclusively associated with fusion or at the very top tier Saiyan arcs. Seeing this level of output from their natural state alone reframes how these two have actually climbed since then. The context opens a fascinating way to look at Goku's path towards Super Saiyan 4. Rather than treating the form as a random evolutionary leap, it can be interpreted as something more intentional, a power he chased with specific danger in mind. Training under the shadow of foes like Kid Buu, who could have pushed Goku towards developing a form meant to counter monsters on his caliber. Super Saiyan 4 becomes less of a happy accident and more of a contingency plan and a form designed to deal with future nightmares. This interpretation also aligns with how restrained Super Saiyan 4 initially feels in Daima. We first see the child version of the form, and it doesn't radiate the kind of overwhelming gulf associated with godly transformations. Characters are still able to coordinate, clash, and briefly keep up before being overpowered. It doesn't come off as a 100 times leap, it feels closer to an old school Dragon Ball style boost, substantial but grounded. Something in the range of a few times stronger than Super Saiyan 3 rather than a cosmic tier escalation. Once the characters return to their normal bodies though, the perception shifts. Base Vegeta without any aura flare or transformation is suddenly capable of trading blows with Goma. Piccolo's reaction sells us harder than any numbers ever could. This is the same Piccolo who's fought alongside Ultimate Gohan and witnessed Fusion Warriors in action. Yet even he struggles to process what he's seeing. That kind of disbelief implies that Goku and Vegeta's baseline power may now overlap with or even exceed ceilings that once belonged to exclusively top-tier Buu Saga monsters. Goma's behavior reinforces this idea. Against Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, his adaptation takes time. He studies, reacts, and gradually adjusts. But when Goku unveils Super Saiyan 4, the adjustment is almost immediate. Goma reads the shift, counters it, and nearly shuts Goku down in short order. That contrast suggests that early Super Saiyan 4 might not start dramatically above Super Saiyan 3 in raw output, at least not at first. It may be a form that needs a moment to stabilize or awaken its deeper reserves, especially given the strange dynamic between child and adult physiology in Daima. Then everything spikes. Goma doesn't just adapt again, he evolves completely. His body swells into a massive kaiju-like monstrosity towering over the battlefield and visually separating this phase of the fight from anything before. It's a classic Dragon Ball escalation, but one that carries an important implication. The battlefield has moved beyond simple form versus form comparisons. At this point, it's less about which transformation is bigger and more about who can continue to grow when pushed to the edge. There isn't really any clean numerical way to pin down how much stronger these transformations actually make the characters. Dragon Ball has never really worked like a spreadsheet. That said, the visual language of the series still communicates a lot. When a character's body dramatically increases in size, it has historically been shorthanded for a major rise in physical output. Goma's monstrous expansion into a towering kaiju-like entity isn't just aesthetic spectacle. It's the story signaling that his power has surged far beyond its previous limits. Within that framework, even generous interpretations of fighters like Kid Buu start to feel strained when placed next to a being whose strength is escalating so violently and so quickly. This leads into an important structural detail. Daima does not operate under the anime version of Dragon Ball Super's continuity. It aligns far more closely with the manga's timeline and tone. That distinction matters a lot, as the manga scaling tends to be more restrained and less reliant on explicit numbers, which generally avoids the constant escalation in a universe-shaking spectacle that the anime often embraces. Because of that, the ceiling for what we should reasonably assume in Daima is lower by default. Goku and Vegeta are still absurdly strong, but their feats should be filtered through manga-style logic rather than anime. Another subtle but telling detail appears during the final confrontation when Goku is restored to his adult body. His physical proportions are noticeably bulkier than in his child state, even while using the same transformation. In Dragon Ball's internal logic, increase in mass often correlates with increased striking power and durability, which opens the door that the idea that Super Saiyan 4 may express itself differently depending on the user's physiology. The same form but with different output. The adult version may simply be able to draw more from the transformation's potential even if the base multiplier itself doesn't change. Taken all together, this creates a much more nuanced power landscape than the simple tier list suggests. Power in Daima isn't just about stacking bigger numbers, it's also about adaptability. Now, focusing specifically on adult Super Saiyan 4, it's easy to assume that it must possess a higher multiplier than the child version, but the evidence doesn't strongly support that conclusion. Goma's near instant adjustment to Super Saiyan 4, faster than his adaptation to Super Saiyan 3, implies that the initial jump in raw power may not be enormous. Instead, what stands out is how well Goku endures punishment in this form. Much like GT's interpretation of Super Saiyan 4, the emphasis seems to be on toughness, stamina, and the ability to continue fighting after absorbing heavy damage. Even when Goku insists that he's giving everything he has, the way he repeatedly recovers and pushes back suggests there's a gradual internal growth occurring rather than a single explosive leap. When you zoom out and compare Daima to the wider Dragon Ball franchise, this version of Super Saiyan 4 looks considerably more restrained than his GT counterpart. As for the multiplier, none are officially defined for either iteration. Still, internal scaling proves hints. Neva's magic enhancement is shown boosting Tamagami 2 from struggling against Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta to forcing Vegeta into Super Saiyan 3. Since Super Saiyan 3 is traditionally treated as about 4 times Super Saiyan 2, it's reasonable to interpret Neva's amplification as roughly a 4 to 5 times boost. The same magic is involved in awakening Super Saiyan 4 in Goku, which suggests that this magnitude of increase may be part of the process. If Super Saiyan 4 itself carries an additional multiplier on top of that, you might be looking at something in the ballpark of a 10-fold increase overall. Respectable and significant, but still far below the kind of exponential jumps associated with fusion or divine forms. And that, more than anything else, reinforces the idea that Daima Super Saiyan 4 occupies its own lane, a primal endurance-focused evolution rather than a god-tier power explosion. Broly occupies a very strange space among Dragon Ball Z's upper-tier threats, because the way his power expresses itself is fundamentally more chaotic than other villains. Even with the suppression device clamped onto him and his mind barely holding together, the scale of destruction he has is already extreme. We're not talking about city-level devastation or even planet-by-planet carnage. We're talking about the mass erasure on a cosmic scale while he isn't anywhere near full capacity. In his restrained state, Broly is shown laying waste to enormous stretches of the South Quadrant. A lot of people casually refer to this as one galaxy, but Dragon Ball's cosmology doesn't work that way. Each quadrant of the universe contains an unfathomable amount of galaxies, star systems, and cosmic structures. Supplementary materials such as Daizenshu and Chozenshu describe the Dragon Ball universe as containing infinite galaxies and solar systems, meaning each quadrant is strategically vast. So when Broly is depicted wiping out what visually appears to be a massive fraction of an entire universe, the living universe to be specific, the implication is far beyond simple galaxy destruction. Even taking a conservative stance, that level of devastation places Broly comfortably into multi-galaxy territory, and that's before factoring in transformations, power growth, or even the loss of control. And this isn't even his ceiling, it's essentially his floor. Across different guidebooks, dialogue, and narrative framing, a consistent idea keeps up. If Broly is allowed to continue unchecked, everything eventually dies. The universe doesn't survive at all. Whether that outcome happens quickly or unfolds through a chain reaction of destruction isn't always clarified, but the destination is always the same, and it's a total collapse. That intent is reinforced repeatedly in his debut movie. Characters don't just treat Broly as another powerful enemy, they treat him like a walking extinction event. The tone surrounding him isn't "we might lose this fight," it's "if this guy keeps moving, there will be nothing left." What makes this especially important is the context of Broly being mortal. Villains like Majin Buu or Cell can theoretically exist forever as they don't age or weaken over time. If they take centuries to destroy the universe, that's still within their nature. Broly, however, doesn't have the luxury. He's a Saiyan with the biological lifespan. Even being generous, he probably has a few decades of peak combat ability before age starts to catch up to him. So when characters say Broly threatens the universe, they aren't implying a slow, inevitable erosion over eons. They're talking about a relatively short window. A being with a limited lifespan who is still projected to wipe out everything. That's what separates Broly from a lot of other so-called universal threats. It isn't just the end result that matters, it's the pace. Broly isn't portrayed as someone who might eventually destroy the universe if left long enough alone. He's portrayed as someone who would tear through it fast enough that people are panicking at the moment. In other words, the danger isn't hypothetical, it's more imminent. And that frame adds an extra layer to Broly's scaling. Broly isn't simply strong in the traditional Dragon Ball sense, he's a runaway force of nature whose power growth, destructive output, and time-limited existence combine into something uniquely terrifying. When the story treats him as a universe-level threat, it's not using that label loosely. It's communicating that Broly's rampage operates on a scale and a schedule that very few characters in Dragon Ball history can match up to. Broly's return and Broly's second coming exists in this strange, almost dreamlike space within Dragon Ball logic that bends power scaling and becomes secondary to atmosphere. The movie takes place years after his first debut, yet instead of being truly gone, Broly survives in a way that feels less biological and more supernatural. His shattered body drifts through space, crashes onto Earth, and becomes frozen beneath layers of ice and water, without oxygen, movement, or consciousness. And yet, he endures, not as a wounded Saiyan clinging to life, but more like an unlikable presence sealed away by circumstances rather than death. The film leans into the idea heavy as well. Nature itself seems uneasy around the place that Broly is buried. Violent storms roll in, local whispers about something evil sleeping underground, and the tone suggests it isn't just Broly resting. Less of a man and more of a calamity waiting to reawaken. What finally stirs him isn't a battle or a massive energy surge or some kind of cosmic event. It's the sound of a child crying. Goten's voice echoes through the ice and triggers Broly's fractured memories, and this instantly drags him back into his obsessive hatred for Goku. It's absurd on paper, but thematically perfect. Broly isn't driven by logic, it's more so trauma. Once he awakens, his behavior makes it clear that he isn't interested in quick victories. He stalks his opponents, toys with them, lunges at them, struggles them, and panics them, almost like he's savoring the inevitability of their defeat. Videl even gets an unusual extended moment of resistance before being overwhelmed, which only emphasizes how cruel Broly is being. He's allowing hope to exist just so he can crush it later. Goten and Trunks next step in, both capable of Super Saiyan, and they fight with genuine determination. But from the moment Broly engages them, the gap is pretty obvious. He mocks their efforts, tanks their attacks, and chases them down once their stamina starts failing. They aren't opponents to him, they're more like entertainment. And this is where the movie timeline complicates everything. Supplemental materials place Goten and Trunks roughly around the same level of Cell Games era Gohan and standard Super Saiyan. And in this continuity, Gohan never stopped training. Unlike the main series where he becomes rusty by the Buu saga, this version of Gohan has spent 7 years straight training and honing himself. That alone implies a massive difference in baseline strength. The film quietly reinforces this. Gohan carries himself with confidence and his movements are sharp. Not only does he not hesitate, this is a Gohan who never abandoned the warrior path. On top of that, Goten and Trunks appear to naturally remain in a relaxed, calm Super Saiyan state similar to what Goku and Gohan achieved in the hyperbolic time chamber, more than likely meaning they have grade 4. Which would explain why later fusion allows them to jump to Super Saiyan 3 so easily. These kids aren't weak by any stretch of the imagination, and yet none of it matters. When Gohan finally confronts Broly, the tone shifts immediately. Official material claim he's using Super Saiyan 2, even though the usual lightning effects aren't emphasized. Regardless, the result is brutal. Broly overwhelms him almost instantly, Gohan lands hits, but they accomplish nothing. His attacks don't slow Broly or stagger him, and they barely register. That single sequence tells you everything you need to know about where Broly stands in this film. A fully trained Super Saiyan 2 Gohan with 7 years of training is treated like fodder, which strongly implies that this Broly is not only stronger than his original Movie 8 incarnation, but significantly stronger. If Movie 10 Gohan is above Cell Games Gohan and Broly is casually dominating Movie 10 Gohan, then Movie 10 Broly would erase Movie 8 Broly, possibly in a direct comparison, especially since Gohan was confident in taking on Broly, knowing how strong he was back then. After the defeat of Gohan, the finale only widens the gap. Broly begins charging a colossal energy attack commonly referred to as the Omega Blaster, a sphere so massive it visually rivals or surpasses some of the largest blasts in the franchise movie history. Instead of a single hero opposing it, Gohan is joined by Goten and Trunks, and then later something stranger happens. Goku appears. Whether this is a literal manifestation from the afterlife or a temporary projection born from Goten's wish has been debated for decades, but multiple guidebooks lean towards Goku genuinely intervening. Even Broly's shocked expression suggests he recognizes Goku's presence as real. Even with 3 Saiyans pushing together, they struggle. Broly doesn't look panicked or strained, and the Omega Blaster doesn't even feel like his absolute limit. It comes across more like an overwhelming flex of power than a final desperate move. Only after Trunks intercepts some of Broly's smaller blasts and the trio forces everything into a single combined push do they finally overpower the attack and send it back. Broly is caught off guard, engulfed in the explosion, and seemingly destroyed. And that's the key word as well, caught off guard. Not defeated in a fair contest. By the end of the film, Broly feels less like a villain who lost and more like a catastrophe that was barely contained. When it comes down to actually squabbling between these guys, they have similar scaling, which makes this particular matchup pretty interesting. Goma is stated to be the strongest enemy, which would directly follow after Kid Buu and Buuhan. Daima, though, following the manga continuity of Dragon Ball, has Super Saiyan 4 Daima Goku being stronger than the Buus, but not the ones with the insane feats that were displayed in the anime, such as Buuhan using outside space or Kid Buu threatening to destroy the Grand Kaio planet. There are still some statements and scaling that could be used to get these boosts to universal, but it's not as strongly concrete as statements and scaling shown for Broly. Broly, in one of his weakest incarnations in the first movie, destroyed 1/4 of the living universe, a feat that's 1/4 of what Buuhan was going to do in the anime. Mind you, Broly wasn't in legendary Super Saiyan form when he performed this, and this is only movie 8 Broly. He gets much stronger in Broly's second coming. All that would need for him to destroy the entirety of the living universe would be to get 4 times stronger than what he was as a suppressed Super Saiyan, something he probably is already in movie 8 itself. when he's in his legendary form. The idea of Broly being able to easily destroy the entire living universe would be a more impressive feat than even Buhan, since he would be doing it in a result of dimension crashing together and not through his direct involvement like Broly would be. When you also consider the fact that Broly grows stronger as the fight progresses on, Goku will more than likely be in a similar state that he was fighting against Goma. One could argue that Daima Super Saiyan 4 Goku could scale above the Spirit Bomb that defeated him in the manga, one that gathered energy from across the universe and is stated to be the maximum power in the Buu Saga. With that line of scaling, you could get Daima Super Saiyan 4 above Super Saiyan Vegito, but then again, this would be all manga, and even manga Vegito doesn't have the same kind of scaling that he does in the anime, being able to easily dismantle Buhan, who threatened to destroy the entire living universe. So even then, I think the better scaling implications are in Broly's favor, making him the decisive winner in this battle.